Commercial vehicles are expected to account for 10% of Europe's electricity demand, with nearly 80% of charging happening at depots. The real challenge is the grid isn't designed to handle thousands of depots charging heavily vehicles simultaneously. Today, we're speaking with Carl-Magnus Norden, co-founder of Volta Trucks and co-founder of Decade Energy, an infratech company building the energy infrastructure layer behind fleet electrification. Welcome to a new episode of Net Zero. Hi, Carl-Magnus.
Hi, nice to be here.
Yeah, nice to have you on the podcast today. Let's start with our first question. So you founded Volta Trucks, I think in 2019, to accelerate electrification. What did you believe at the time?
Well, what I thought of Volta Trucks was really started more or less 2016, I would say. And the trigger for me was when Elon Musk launched the Model 3, so the car, which was, as you maybe remember, it was, they got thousands of orders in a few weeks' time. And for me as an entrepreneur then and worrying about the climate, that was kind of a signal. Something is happening here. It's that new trend coming. September 16, most of the car industry came to Paris, the car show in Paris, and said they should go electric. Daimler or Mercedes, Volkswagen, BMW, etc. When I then looked around and looked at the transport business or the road transport business with trucks, nothing was even mentioned at the time in 16, 17, 18 about electric trucks. So then I said, if none of the big OEMs want to do it, let's see if we can have an impact to do something in that space. So that's really the origin of the idea of Volta Trucks. We actually founded a company and raised some of the first money in 2019. And we spent most of that money on building a prototype, which we then had ready actually in September 2020, middle of the COVID. But we anyway managed to go around Europe and show it to potential customers, people that are driving trucks.
How was the first impression back then? Because in 2020, were there a lot of electric trucks already, or was it the first of a kind?
No, there wasn't any electric trucks 2020. So we were the pioneers, I would say. The reception from most of the people we talked to, so the big people driving trucks or carriers, was very positive. There was nobody saying, I love diesel, I love dirty the nature and kill my children, etc. They all said, okay, electric is probably the future. Then from there, from liking the idea to actually signing an order is obviously quite some steps. We spent 3 years of course, building a real truck, homologated in all over Europe, talking to different fleet operators in all 10 countries in Europe, and so on and so on. But the general, I would say the goodwill of bringing the product to the market was very strong. So I even had people saying, okay, I love your idea. How can we help? Basically. So there was no resistance really from, even if people are used, of course, in many years to drive diesel trucks, they were all interested in the future.
Interesting. So if the interest is there and was there, where's the real bottleneck that, holds us back to really electrify the fleet?
I think we were obviously a very small player. There are the big people in Europe, so Daimler, the Volvo Group, Renault, DAF, Scania, MAN, etc. I think even they, quite early on, anyway, from 2021, 22 onwards, have said, we believe in this. And they started thinking about, should we build cells? Should we do packing, etc.? But in parallel to that, of course, the whole battery market was conquered by the Chinese. So if you and I were sitting in a boardroom of any of these big companies, we would ask ourselves, what in this, in this technology chain should we be really strong at so we can justify high salaries in Europe and things like that. So it was not easy for them. And, normally for them, developing a new diesel engine normally takes 5-6 years. And if they started 2020, we're still only 6 years down the road of development. So right now, the best long-haul truck in the market is the Daimler e-Actros 600 that they launched a little bit more than a year ago. Tesla is opening about now a new 50,000 truck a year plant in Nevada for building the Tesla Semi. So that will probably come by the end of the year to Europe. And then we have the Chinese. And the Chinese have, of course, scaled much faster than anybody else. In Europe, you sell about 350,000 trucks a year.
Okay.
Last year in China, they sold about 230,000 electric trucks. So they are already at scale.
That's interesting. And actually, yeah, very exciting times right now. But if we change the perspective from OEM towards, the fleet owner that wants to electrify their fleet, what are the big bottlenecks right now to electrify the fleet and really go all in electric vehicles?
What is really stopping them is the quality of the supply and the price of the supply. And the price is still too high. I mean, you hear different people, etc. But anyway, a year ago, or less than a year ago, an e-Actros 600 cost about 300,000 euro, while an equivalent diesel truck maybe cost 120 to 140. So more than double the price. And for a buyer, then you have to be able to justify that difference, which is not so easy. That is one factor. Then I think that is the short-term factor why they haven't come at scale into the depots or orders anyway. And as I said, my forecast is that these prices for electric trucks will go down maybe 30% over the next year. So then I think the economic argument will favor electric trucks. Because you have other things. You have, of course, they always talk about total cost of ownership, or TCO. And of course, in the TCO, you have the hardware, the truck cost, but you also have the energy. Energy prices, of course, with diesel going up right now, and then also service and maintenance should be lower for electric, etc. But anyway, so that to me is almost a short-term problem, which can be fixed very quickly. Some of the OEMs are lowering the prices, and then the TCO stacks up. The more, what should I say? The bigger problem is, as you maybe were indicating in the beginning, is to get enough power, enough electricity to the places where people would like to charge their trucks. And most of that charging they ideally would like to do in the depots. So where often the trucks standing overnight, or they come and pick up goods or distribute goods. So the problem with these places is that a normal transport depot today has very, very little need of electricity. So if they should charge, whatever, 20, 30, 40 trucks, they need many times more, 15, 20, 25, 30 times more electricity than they have today. And the grid are not capable of providing that short term. So I think that's the big bottleneck for the next few years.
So talking about this bottleneck, I think we're coming closer to decade energy, and maybe also the way that you are fixing this problem, and presenting a solution for this one. Could you explain in simple terms what you actually do at Decade Energy?
Yeah, the background and in our history from Volta Trucks, we knew quite a lot, or I think we were in contact with probably the 200 biggest fleet operators in Europe. So we knew that part of the market quite well. When we started this, we said the idea was the same. You need more power in the depots to be able to do the conversion. We started talking to them, but none of them really, or very few anyway, had the intention to order an electric truck very quickly. So the charging as such was not their biggest problem. So then about a year ago, a little bit more, maybe a year and a half, we shifted focus to say, okay, who are the ones that are thinking about this long term? And then we shifted more to the property owner or the logistics real estate owners. Because what we do right now in the first phase, we secure the grid connection to the site, and then to finance that, you can say, we install a battery or a BESS. And with the BESS, there are grid services that we can sell to the grid, to the distribution system operators or the transmission system operators. So that is then our model. We finance the whole equipment and grid connection and all that. And we sell that battery service to the grid. So that is stage number one. But our long-term mission is really that electric trucks should work, basically, and we should see a conversion from diesel trucks to electric trucks. So we start with the property owners, and we in principle secure them for the future. When their customers, the tenants, come to them and say, okay, I bought 10 electric trucks, I need more power, then they should be able to say, okay, yeah, I have power. We have already arranged that. So that's the first phase. The second phase is what I talked about, is really when the fleet operators are then saying, okay, I find it economically viable and I would like to. Then, of course, it's more about charging infrastructure. And I would like to see as well, and it fits very well, more solar on all these people, warehouses, etc. They have big roofs.
Yeah.
It's obviously that you have big parkings and so on. You could use all this space for energy production, local energy production through. So ideally, over time, we would like to see all these things integrated. So that is more or less phase two, which I think is approaching very quickly now. And especially what's happening in the Gulf and, the war, energy pricing up. People are, I think, starting to understand that the energy dependence we have on oil and gas is a horrible thing, and that Europe is starting to go into renewables much quicker than maybe we have done before. So that's phase two. And then phase three is really two things. One is when the trucks are coming. Obviously, these trucks also have big batteries of their own. So, you can see vehicle to grid, the grid, the vehicle batteries feeding into the system. And most importantly, which we're also developing a software layer that we call Brain Kettle, that will integrate all these data streams. So it will integrate the data stream, obviously, from the grid, what their signals, when they would like to get from us, from the battery, from the chargers, from the PV on the roof, from the trucks. All this, if we integrate that in a smart way, we should be able to create the best flexibility and match the demand, the general demand on the energy market. In the mornings, in the evenings, when people use the most energy, the sun is obviously mainly working in the middle of the day, and you can combine all these data. And the trucks are normally charged during night and going out during coming back. How do you integrate all these data streams to make it as efficient as possible? That is our 3 steps of our function.
Exciting. So in the first step, you enable the location, or you enable the grid access for the fleet owners, but without actual demand from their side, right? So you're waiting. You're saying, we know that you in some years, in some month, whatever, will have the demand for electric vehicles, and we will be ready to then provide the power capacity that is needed, right?
Exactly. Yeah.
So you're kind of betting that in these places the demand will grow, right?
But the beauty for us is that the grid needs this capacity. What has happened in Spain, for example, there was too much production from renewables and the grid couldn't absorb it. And of course, if you have battery capacity, and that's the next wave of this, is more battery capacity. So you can harness some of this energy when it's produced, and you can then disperse it when it's obviously during night or things. So the grid is paying for that. For that flexibility and so on.
Yeah, I mean, so in the worst case, you will still have the best operating at this grid connection, and you will still make money. And in the best case, then the next steps will follow, right? Like the phase 2, phase 3.
Exactly.
So right now, in which regions are you operating, and in which phase?
Well, so far, I would say 99%, we are only doing phase 1. And our home market is France. So we're developing, I don't know what, 70, 80 projects in France.
Mhm.
We have been lucky to start working with some of the biggest logistics real estate owners in the world that all of them or several of them have operations not only in France, but, all over Europe. And then the natural way or the best way for us to expand is following our customers. If they're happy with what we do in France, it's quite natural to ask, okay, why don't we look at Germany together? Why don't we look at Spain together? Why don't, So that is one way of expanding. And the other way is, of course, more proactively looking at different markets and trying to gauge where is the market ready? Where is the revenue stack from the energy or the grid services big enough and secure enough, etc. So right now we are talking to real estate owners, looking at portfolios in France, obviously, Germany, Sweden, Poland, and Romania. And we are now starting to look also at Italy and Spain and the UK. So, but actively, 90% of our projects right now are in France.
So when you say that 99% nearly is in phase one, could you give us some number of BESS pipeline that you're operating or developing right now, to just give us a number?
Right now we have, the most advanced 50 projects, I think it's about 200 megawatt of BESS. So that's where we are right now. We are looking at, we negotiated actually a joint venture with another real estate group for 5 times as much, of being able to do that. It's money is not enough. You have to go to a market where we actually can get grid connection. So it's, even if you have a portfolio of properties in France, or 150 or 160 properties, right now we probably can only get some 5 megawatt grid connection with, 30% or 20% of that. Then, of course, the grid is not static, so they are building out. But this new demand for the grid was obviously not there 5 years ago or even 3 years ago. So if you are one of the grid people or the energy providers as such, this demand from trucks and cars is quite new. The cars have been going now for a little while, but trucks has not really started, honestly. So we have quite a lot of or should I say, talks with different grid operators, to together see where will this demand come in the future, and how can they try to build out plans to supply to logistics centers where all the trucks are standing. So it's relatively new for everybody, and it's an educational task combined with obviously a technical challenge.
Yeah, for sure. You were mentioning the different markets that you are looking at right now, but how do you really define which one is the right market and why you enter this and that market?
To be honest, France was a little bit more by chance,
Mhm.
but it happens to be that it was probably the best market to start in.
Yeah, why?
Because the grid is quite strong compared to other markets. So there is higher possibility in France to be able to get 5 megawatt in more places than some other markets. I think almost the worst is the Netherlands. The UK is difficult. Sweden is okay, and so on and so on. So how do we then evaluate the market? Well, we have to, obviously, whatever we do, we have the revenue stream that we get from the grid has to be bankable and has to be enough. The cost of an installation is, I shouldn't say exactly the same in different markets, but no super big differences. More or less half or a little bit more than half of the cost is batteries, and they cost the same if it's in Poland or if it's in France or if it's in Spain. And then, of course, digging in the ground, etc., is maybe a little bit cheaper in some markets than others, but it's not a big difference. So on the cost side, it's about the same. On the revenue side is then how the grid advanced the grid is with the grid services, and different markets are different advanced. And then, so we have to, of course, the grid services have to give a certain expected revenue and an expected internal rate of return for the investment. And then the second thing is, in a market, is it bankable? Is somebody, if you sign a contract with an aggregator, as the people we sign with that actually manage the different grid services, how bankable are they? So there are different things.
What are the factors? What are the different factors to make a project bankable?
Well, it's obviously number one, you have to get the grid connection. So that's,
It's already hard. Yeah.
if you don't get it, you don't have a business. So that's number one. But assuming you can get grid connection anyway, if you look at the portfolio of 50 properties, maybe 10 of them in any market you can get. So you assume that's the first step. The second step then is, as I said, the cost side is relatively, so it's obviously important, but it's not so fluctuating. And then is what kind of grid services are available on the market from the DSOs and the TSO. And then in some relatively a little bit earlier markets, you can have very profitable, but normally the depth of that market is not so big. So it may be the revenue goes down quite quickly. And we do 15, 20-year projects. So we have to obviously believe, our financiers have to believe that the revenue will continue over time. And then bankable is, you and I maybe could say, you could tell me that, okay, I buy your battery capacity for the next 15 years and I give you millions. And that would give a super good IRR to me. But if I then look at you and say, okay, yeah, but how can you guarantee that to me? Then you have to be bankable. You have to say, okay, I belong to, a big corporation or something like that. So that's the bankability part of it. So these things has to come together.
Okay. So if you continue to grow and if you begin to enter the next phases, obviously if everything succeeds as planned, where's Europe staying and where's Stickett Energy staying in 2035?
I believe that everybody driving a truck in Europe would like to have it electric by 2035. Honestly, I think most of them will want to have it already 2030, because I think it will be not only cheaper, but if you talk to any truck driver, having driven an electric truck is a much better experience for them. It's safer, it's less noisy, it's less vibrations, so it is wearing them much less than driving a diesel truck. So from a driver's point of view, it's considerably better. And if it's economically better for the owners of the trucks, then why should anybody buy a diesel truck? So that is on the demand side. Then we come back to the bottleneck with the grid. Of course, if they cannot get the power to charge their trucks, then nobody can buy an electric truck. And of course, you have the roadside charging that people like Milans, etc., are developing. Most people are saying that the demand for that would probably be less than 20% of the demand of electricity. Similar to cars, most people are charging the cars at home during the night or at the office when they stand in the office. It will be the same thing with trucks. Or people would like to have it in the depots. Short term, as I said, we need grid connection for doing that. And that's obviously what we are concentrating on short term. Medium term, I would like to see, and I think we will see, local generation of electricity. Solar, wind, etc., more local than a very big farm somewhere. And we can do it with, as I said, with the logistics buildings, big roofs and parkings, etc. So that would unlock quite a lot of electricity. Then in the third phase, as I talked about, the batteries themselves in the trucks, I think also that will enable more trucks to be electric. Because I think most people would come back in the depot at 6 o'clock or 5 o'clock in the afternoon with 30% of the batteries still with energy. And if we can take that, you know how it is, the grid or the energy systems have oversupply in most hours of of the year. The grid today is set up for the maximum of all different people asking for electricity. But the actual average use is probably 20% or something like that. So if you balance that differences through battery storage, you can increase the capacity of the grid much more. So I think that is also a big factor that will happen. And then, as I said, the grid people will build out and so on, even if it takes 5 years to do these things. So in 10 years' time, I think everybody should be able to charge, and everybody should be able to have an electric vehicle, electric truck. But I think most of the big OEMs have ambitions to sell 50% of the production electric by 2030. So that's not to say that 50% suddenly on the fleet and on the streets or on the roads would be electric. It will come quite quickly, I think. But the big bottleneck will be power.
And of the journey of Decade Energy, what is what most excites you?
Well, I think the opportunity to really have an impact on decarbonization, which is becoming more and more important in Europe these days, system resilience. Because we have a Russian guy that suddenly can invade anywhere, and the big power systems, big power plant, big BESS battery, big cables. In Sweden, we produce all the energy in the north and we consume in the south, which means we have big cables going thousands of kilometers. If you are not friendly, they are very easy to destroy. And that's what we have seen in Ukraine. What do the Russians do? The first thing they do is going after the electric system. We had this winter, I don't know how many millions that was actually freezing in their homes because they didn't have any energy. That is a scenario that could happen anywhere in Europe today. If we go then much more local, so what I'm after is really local supply of energy, local consumption of energy, then that system would be much more resilient. We are also seeing right now with the Gulf War that obviously somebody can close that tap. Right now it's called the Strait of Hormuz, and everybody is fucked. And that can happen even if they find a solution now next week. That can happen again and again and again. And for Europe, we don't produce any oil and gas. So for us, going renewables is just not doing it.
No-brainer. Yeah.
And China has obviously already proven it can be done. The beauty of China doing this in scale for the last 10 years is that batteries and all renewables, the prices have dropped, 90-95%.
Yeah.
So we can buy it today. It's a viable alternative. I think right now it's probably much cheaper alternative to produce energy than buying oil and gas. And oil and gas is super dangerous for us, basically. Independently of, we also obviously feed global warming and all the bad things with oil and gas.
Yes, you will have an important role. And as you said, we have to, on one side, decentralize the energy systems. And on the other hand, we have to make us resilient against any threat from other countries.
And even and it's the same thing if you have a car and you have solar on your roof and a small battery. You can go in the summer in Spain much more than in Sweden, obviously, but you can continue operating for weeks, if not months, on that. And it's even more important, of course, when it comes to trucks, as today 8% of them or 99% of them are depending on diesel. If somebody stops the supply of diesel, the trucks will stop within a week. And then what does that mean? It means that it will be no supply of food and medicine, etc., to our cities. So people will start starving in the cities within a couple of weeks. And I mean, we can just not accept having these risks hanging over us all the time. And the good thing compared to former Gulf wars and oil shocks, etc., is that now there is a viable alternative, which is renewables. Have never been before, but now we should just go full scale into solar, wind, battery, electric vehicles. And we come out, if we do that in a serious way, we come out in a couple of years' time much, much better off.
So we're coming to an end. What is the best way to reach out if, there's interest?
Well, I mean, the best is, of course, we have the Decade Energy website. We are trying to be quite active on LinkedIn as well. So I think these both kind of sources, as always, when you start up, so much is happening all the time. So not everything comes out in the public, but I think we try to keep people informed what is happening and the opportunities and so on. So listeners, of course, it would be very happy if people want to follow our journey. As I said, we want to learn more about all markets in Europe. So we are very happy to hear people your input and so on. What we're doing, when is the best time to enter markets and so on.
Perfect. Yeah, thank you so much for the time, Carl-Magnus. It was really interesting.
Thank
And
you.
I'm excited to see where this journey will go to.
Okay, very good. Thank you very much.